I rise unafraid, I rise up, and I do it 1,008 times again. And I rise up, I like the waves, I rise up, in spite of the ache, I rise up, and I do it 1,008 times again. The silence is in quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we would take the world to its feet. Ooh, mountains, bring it to its feet. Ooh, mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. And we will rise, we will rise, we will rise. Oh, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up in spite of the air. I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up. I like the waves will rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise up. And we'll do it 1,000 times again.
My name is John James, and I started the Grief Recovery Institute over 30 years ago as a result of the death of a son in 1967. I, like many other people that I've met over the years, had made the assumption that loss was such a common occurrence that there would be people who were trained to know how to help. And sadly, what I discovered is that most of the help offered was intellectual in nature, and my brain wasn't really broken, it was my heart. So over a period of about 8 months, I discovered a process that helped people feel better.
John James created the phrase grief recovery back in the late 70s. Almost never heard the words grief and recovery in the same sentence. And people would say to us, is recovery even possible? To this day, some people still contest it. But we discuss it with them, we argue it with them, and we show them from our own personal experience, from our own losses, how we have recovered and regained a sense of well-being in our lives in spite of the losses that have happened.
The concept that we were operating with at the time was, how do you deliver grief recovery assistance to the largest number of people in the shortest period of time? consequently, the first obvious thing was write a book. The first book was the Grief Recovery Handbook, which is now in its fourth edition, the 20th anniversary edition, that has been translated into multiple languages. Our book, When Children Grieve, also has been translated into multiple languages. And a third book called Moving On deals with the enormous sadness that revolves around divorce and romantic relationships that don't survive even to the point of a marriage. But even with a book, you're only going to reach a certain number of people. And so we then decided that we would create these grief recovery outreach programs, which are moderated recovery groups where people take very specific actions to heal their heart.
The really neat part is we give a practical, applicable set of actions people can take rather than sitting and waiting to feel better, which most people do because that's what they were taught. So the key here is actions to feel better or different than we felt and not be paralyzed into inaction, which keeps us stuck forever.
We began to train people, individuals, who would then return to their local community and moderate these grief recovery outreach programs. We started out with 4, and now I don't know the number. We have thousands of them now.
One of the reasons I'm sitting here talking today is so that we can make ourselves available to people when the need is. Otherwise, they go, I needed you 20 years ago when my daughter died. Where were you? We don't want anyone to have to say that ever again.
Every loss is as the result of the end of an emotional relationship, and every relationship is unique. So everyone grieves at 100% whatever the loss is, and one loss has nothing whatsoever to do with the other.
Part of grief recovery is to unlearn some of the stuff we all learned. So, and whether we learned it professionally or at the feet of our parents, doesn't matter. We have to unlearn some myths about grief so we can learn the method that will help us complete unfinished business.
It is up to the griever when they decide that they are willing and able to come in to do the grief recovery method. It is not up to us to tell them when they have to do that. One of the most heartbreaking things is that we hear from grievers is they call and say, well, I was told that I'm not supposed to come into the group or do any work for a year, which is kind of crazy.
It is never too soon to start to heal your heart. I would say that within 15 minutes following a loss of any kind, the griever's mind is already starting to identify the things that they wish they had done differently or better. I cannot imagine, nor have I seen in 34 years, any benefit accrue to anyone as a result of waiting.
We have a different perspective, and the perspective is 2 things. It's an absolute respect of unique individual human relationships and a recognition of a method of recovery that is available to anyone who's willing to do it.
I don't care where they live. I don't care what their economic status is. I don't care what their religious beliefs are. When you experience a loss, your heart hurts, and we would love to help all the people who are having that kind of an experience.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Ah, there's so many of you. How exciting. Okay, I need
We
Michelle.
can hear you, Dar.
Awesome. I need Michelle and Lupe to unmute. And if the rest of you please stay muted until we're ready to take questions from people or when we're ready to share stories. So we appreciate all of you being on here today. Gosh, we've never had this many people in person before, so we appreciate, again, all of you guys taking time out of your day. My name is Darlene Garcia, and I'm going to be co-hosting this today with Michelle Sasimoto and Lupe Camacho. So let me just share my screen one more time. Okay, can you guys see that? We good?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Okay, so I just wanted to, before we even begin talking about what it is that we're going to be talking about, we just have a couple of disclaimers. So the first one is that all three of us ladies are grief recovery specialists. So we are not counselors, therapists, or licensed clinicians. We are trained and certified by the Grief Recovery Institute to teach a method that helps people navigate through their own loss and grief in their life. But that is only one hat that we wear. Each of us wear several different hats. And as the ladies come on and introduce themselves, you'll know exactly what it is that we all specialize in. We are also Facebook Live right now. So if you guys don't want yourselves to be shown, you just keep your camera off. But for the most part, it is going to show, since I am the one sharing it, I'll go ahead and put it on speaker view so that it only shows whoever is speaking. So I'm going to stop this share really quick. All right, here we go. Okay, guys, so this is Grief Talk in the midst of a pandemic. We are, again, grief recovery specialists. We're here to have conversation with all of you about the struggles, the challenges, the emotional and mental challenges that we are all going through during this time of the COVID-19 era. It is an era, it's a time in history that I don't think anyone has ever experienced before. And so with that comes so many different emotions that all of us may be feeling. And so we'll each talk a little bit about who we are and what we do and what our stories are and how we discovered the grief recovery method. So I'm going to start off with myself. Again, my name is Darlene Garcia. And I discovered the grief recovery method about almost 5 years ago, I think, right, Michelle? Has it been like 5 years or 4 years? Can't remember.
Almost 5 years,
right? Yeah, it's been almost 5 years that I have actually been certified with the method. But before I became certified, I actually took the method for my own personal grief. I became a widow back in 2015, and it was during that deep grief in my life that I was seeking help. And you know, to be honest with you guys, I did not find any resources that can help me on the island. Not that we don't have resources, we have a ton of resources on the island, but for me specifically, I could not find anything that could help me navigate through my grief. And so when someone introduced me to the grief recovery method, I looked it up online, and I was actually quite disappointed that we didn't have the services on Guam. But that didn't stop me. I left to Austin, Texas, and I took the grief recovery method for myself. And literally in a matter of 2.5 days, I finally started to believe in hope again. And I saw this small spark of light. And it's something that I never thought could be possible, you know, after losing the love of my life. And so I go back to Guam. I'm this different person. And don't get me wrong, it was not this, you know, 100% like I was healed completely. But what happened was I was able to have now these tools that helped me navigate through my grief of losing my husband. And so I shared this with my widow support group. Michelle was part of that group, and she'll share her story with you. And from there, you know, we all kind of ventured off back to the States again. There was 4 of us in the beginning that got certified because we knew that the island needed another option, right? We have many options on the island, but we knew that we needed something else. And so the 4 of us went off and got certified with the method. And ever since then, it's been an amazing journey for all of us. And then in 2018, we got, gosh, maybe 15 more, was it 15 more specialists certified between Guam and Saipan. And Lupe is one of our specialists from Saipan, and she'll come on and talk a little bit about her story. But it's been an amazing journey, ladies and gentlemen, and we are so honored to be here, to be able to share our stories. Again, this isn't going to be a platform of slideshows. I showed you one. I'll probably bring on a couple towards the end, but it's really about conversation. The ladies and I are going to come on, and we're going to share our experiences with you. And then after that, we will give you all an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have questions throughout the talk, we ask that you put it in the chat. We have another one of our grief recovery specialists, Kate Baltazar Dodge, and she's going to be looking at the questions for us, and then she'll be our question moderator towards the end, so that way we'll be able to answer your questions via that channel. And then for those of you that are viewing on Facebook Live, thank you again for tuning in. And please go ahead and put your questions in the chat on Facebook as well, because we also have another grief recovery specialist, Raylene Elicto, and she'll be monitoring those questions for us there. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Michelle and have her talk and tell you guys a little bit about who she is, how she discovered the method, and what are the hats she wears. So it's all yours, hon.
Hi, happy day, everybody. Thank you, Dar. Such a pleasure to be on this tonight. Growing up, I was always reminded of the saying, never forget where you came from. And when I was asked the question, like, how did I come here today? How did I discover grief recovery method? It was really through where I came from. And that was a deep emotional pain. It was a tunnel that was so dark that I felt like I was the only one in that tunnel. In 2012, this year will be 8 years since I've lost my husband. He was my best friend. He was the father of my only child. He was my source of income. He was my champion of life, my mighty man of valor. He was my dream come true. And all of a sudden, one day in 2012, that took a turn for a different life for me. And my husband passed away, and I was left with immense grief. I also play a role. I'm also a prevention program coordinator for the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. So all my life, I have been in the business of saving lives and helping people. And what I discovered when I was going through my own journey was people were telling me how fast I recovered from the loss of my husband. They were telling me that I was this amazing person, but little did they know that I was really just grieving alone. I was keeping all those emotions to myself because of the role that I held in my family, in the community. And I thought that I had to be strong for everybody else, knowing that I wasn't even strong for myself. And so when I had met Darlene and I saw her when she lost her husband and how in a dark place she was, it reminded me of my journey. She had gone off to grief recovery, to the workshop to find help for herself, came back. She was a transformed person. I knew that if anything, I had to go and be a part of that, to do the work so that I could be able to help myself go through my grief, help myself, and then be able to be a better server or a better helper to other people. And hence why I'm here. I know what it feels like to be in a room filled with people that love you and support you and care about you, like I'm certain many of you may feel every now and then in your life, but also still feel like the only person in that room. And that was a very, very painful place to be. And so in my journey, healing, it's never too soon to start your healing. And I am so passionate about this because I have discovered that the light is always present. The light is always present. And I want to be able to share that with other people. So thank you again for having me here.
Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. That was so beautiful. And now we're going to bring on our Saipan beauty, Miss Lupe Camacho, and she's going to tell you guys a little bit about who she is.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad to see a bunch of people from our islands, on Zoom tonight. Again, my name is Lupe Camacho, and I am one of the certified grief recovery specialists here in Saipan, in the CNMI. And what led me to grief recovery was Michelle. Michelle Sasimoto had come over for a conference with some of our school counselors here, and she shared her story. You know, she shared a little bit more about the method and the wonderful things it has done for her and her family and her healing journey. And she presented an opportunity to get certified and training on Guam. So myself and 4 other individuals flew over to Guam, and we went through, you know, some certification training, talked about some of our experiences, and it was probably one of the most rewarding and enlightening trainings I've ever attended. You know, I was in awe the whole time about just the amount of information I was learning, and I thought, you know, I knew what grief was and what it looked like, and how I was supposed to handle it, right? It's what I was taught growing up. But turns out that there's so much more to complete your loss and go through this healing journey. My biggest loss at the time was losing my grandmother on my mom's side. And, you know, through the certification training, I had the opportunity to really think about my relationship with my grandmother. Growing up, she was the one that picked me and my sister up from school. Every day there was, you know, a trip to McDonald's or KFC. She was my safe person, and she was my go-to person. And losing her in 2015, oh man, you know, I will remember that day forever. It put a hole in my heart. And, you know, growing up, I was taught to be strong, think of my mom, think of my sister. And so that's what I did, or tried to do. And it wasn't until, you know, I went through the grief recovery method that I realized there was so much work I needed to do for myself. And since that day, I tell you, when I think of my grandmother now, I smile more. You know, I think more of the happy memories. There are times where I do cry because I do miss her, but I've learned to process, right? I'm still healing. She's not here, but I'm okay with that, right? And so that's who I am, and that's kind of what brought me here to the grief recovery certification with these wonderful ladies who I'm so grateful for. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Lupe. That was so beautiful. You know, we are so happy to have Saipan on here represented. We've been wanting to do this for some time now in the physical environment, and something always came up, some sort of challenge that prevented us from going out to Saipan and helping our Saipan team launch grief recovery out there. And so being on this virtual platform, although we miss seeing everybody in person, this has really given us an opportunity to get ourselves out there and now have Saipan a part of our grief talks, and hopefully we'll be able to do more and more collaboration with our Saipan team and all of you that are on here from Saipan. So those of you from Saipan, welcome to our grief talk. We've been doing these type of talks in Guam, for about 2 years now, I think, right, Michelle? Has it been 2 years since we've been doing grief talks in coffee shops? Yeah, so about 2 years now. We've been, you know, we used to do them once a month in coffee shops, and then we even partnered with some of the mayors around the island, and they sponsored grief talks for us as well. And so it's been one of those things where we have been out there in the community in a physical environment. And then when this pandemic hit us, it forced all of us into this place of what we call quarantine, right? So those of you that are in Guam, I believe that you guys are what you call PCOR 1. I am not in Guam right now physically. I am in Canada, so it is almost 5:30 in the morning for me. And I don't know that Saipan is in a quarantine. Lippy, are you guys under quarantine right now?
Yeah, so there are some quarantine measures in place here.
Okay, probably not as strict as Guam though, right?
Probably not. I know, you know, curfew right now is 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. I'm not sure what is Guam that time, or maybe much earlier. But, you know, there are some measures in place. Some businesses can't be open, or there's limited hours and things like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you guys are probably, well, the islands anyways are a little bit more under stricter guidelines when it comes to sheltering in place versus where I'm at in Canada. So, there's a lot of challenges in front of you guys right now, and I'm gonna, literally have the ladies talk about what are some of those different challenges that are happening in both islands. Since I'm actually not there physically, I stay updated with everything that goes on around the island. Of course, that is home. It'll always be home for me. And it breaks my heart to see that, there's so many cases of coronavirus that are happening out there in the islands. I mean, we do have ours out here in Canada as well. And if you look at the numbers and you look at the per capita or the ratio, we're still significantly lower than where you guys are at. But again, it's one of those things that none of us ever thought that we would experience in our lifetime, right? And so it shifted us into this place of unfamiliarity. And when we teach the grief recovery method, we tell people that there are two main definitions of grief. The first one is grief is all about the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. And most people will know and understand that meaning. For most of us that have taken the method, and for those of you that have maybe been former clients of ours, you know that one of the more significant definitions of grief for us is that grief is all about the conflicting feelings caused by a change or end in a familiar pattern of behavior. And that is what we're all experiencing today in our environment. All of the things that we remember to be familiar, all of a sudden it now shifted us into this world of unfamiliar. Having to work from home, our children having to do school from home, all of these things, wearing a mask, people either hours being reduced or maybe being furloughed, businesses closing, people dying of coronavirus, or maybe just dying from other health ailments, and then not even being able to honor and respect and say our goodbyes to our loved ones in a way that we remember. So again, we have been shifted into this place of unfamiliarity, and that is grief. It's all about the conflicting feelings when everything in our life has changed, right? When I think about myself and where I was when my husband died, I went from being a wife to a widow. I didn't even know what it meant to be a widow. In fact, I hated to be labeled as a widow, right? It to me was such a derogatory label because I always remember being Frank Garcia's wife. And so that threw me into a space of unfamiliarity. And with that comes all of these conflicting feelings: anger, fear, confusion, sadness, so many things, even being grateful, and that's what we mean about conflicting, right? I am, not was, but am extremely grateful that I was able to share 24 years of marriage with him before he died. But I'm sad, and I was angry that we could not grow old together, which is what we had planned to do. And so again, those conflicting feelings. And one of the things that I resonated with and loved so much about the grief recovery method is that we learn how to allow the good feelings and the bad feelings to coexist in our lives. We teach and we understand that all of these human emotions are all so natural and normal to feel. And we learn that it is important that we acknowledge these feelings. It is important to know that when someone is feeling a certain way, when someone is grieving, that we not judge them, right? That we hold space for them, that we acknowledge and honor whatever it is that they're feeling in those moments. We also learn and we teach that grief is unique to each of us, right? When Michelle and I first got together in our widow support group, and it's a funny story now, we talk about it now, but at the time, it wasn't funny, right? I went into this widow support group thinking that I'm gonna be around some amazing ladies who finally get it, right? Who finally understand what I'm going through, because my family did not get it. And I walk into this room and these ladies didn't look like they were grieving, right? They were hugging each other, maybe there was a few laughs here and there. And then as they started to share their stories, each of them were on a different part of their journey than I was. My journey just started. I think I lost my husband, it probably was maybe only a month, maybe even a little bit under a month. right? And a lot of these ladies, it's been already a few years. And so they are way ahead in their journey. And where mine is, I didn't even want to step forward into this journey, was where I was at. And so all of a sudden, I went from thinking that I was going to be around people that I could relate to, people that were going to be safe for me to be around, to not being able to relate to any of them. And the space now became completely unsafe for me. And I tell you guys this story now, and Michelle and I laugh about it all the time, right? Because they literally saw my face, and afterwards, I called up Bernice, who was the one who introduced me to this group, and I said, yeah, I'm not coming back. This isn't for me. And she felt extremely bad. She called Michelle and she was like, oh my God, I don't know what we did to Dar, and so it wasn't about them, right? It was about me and where I was at. And so the grief recovery method taught me that we're all unique. Michelle and I are both widows, but we are unique in the relationships that we had with our husbands. We are unique in our beliefs, in how we were raised and what we were taught about grief and human emotion. And so once I learned that, I knew now that it was important to respect her journey, and it was important for her to respect mine. And as we move forward, we know that every person is unique and individual. It's kind of like a handprint, right? We're all unique. Our handprints are not ever the same with one person to the other. And so, I dropped a few nuggets to you guys. If you're listening closely, I talked about the definitions of grief, right? I talked about how grief is unique to each of us. I told you about the definitions of grief. I told you that it was important that we don't judge each other, and that it was important to acknowledge, and that human emotions are meant to be felt. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle and have her talk a little bit about what the grief recovery method has done for her. And then she's going to drop a few nuggets. So listen closely, okay?
Can you guys hear me? Okay, so it's back to not comparing losses. And that's what I've learned also through the grief recovery method. Everybody, again, we can go through the same loss event, but our reactions to it could be very, very different. And one of the things is really about honoring everybody's loss in their own way. And, right now, sometimes we could get caught up in that. And we could compare, we could minimize, we could dismiss other people's losses, or say, you know what? I can't believe that you're actually feeling that way. Like, there's a global crisis going on right now. And seriously, you're thinking about this breakup. Like, you should have been done with that person a long time ago because they weren't good for you. So there's all of these intellectual comments that come out from an individual, and it's not really helpful. So what I have learned through this whole pandemic, and honestly, I'm so thankful that I was able to go through the grief recovery method, because like just because I wear that hat, I am not exempt from losses and pain. And there were multiple losses that have taken place in my life in just this very short 6 months. So you guys are not even going to believe it. And I'm going to share that with you. Before the pandemic, my life was wonderful. I was going through empty nesting. I was going through separation anxiety because my only child had relocated to the mainland to go to school. So that was already hard on its own. That was like so painful. I had to deal with that. I had to come back. At the time, I was in a relationship. So I had a partner at that time. And I thought that was all wonderful, and things were going great. And I was like, okay, this is where my life is supposed to be right now. My journey is supposed to be going through this. And then right before the pandemic hit, that romantic relationship ended, right? And then quarantine, it was locked down right after that. I was left from being with people all the time, being with my daughter, being with my partner, the children, to being with nobody. And boy, that was such a scary and unfamiliar feeling for me, because I've never lived alone before. What had happened was, in the weeks to follow, I got sick. I got so sick that it actually took me to the ER. And this was the time when the lockdown was very strict, when we were in PCOR 1 the first time around. Where I was at GRMC, I was admitted. I didn't even think I was going to be admitted. I was admitted. My sister had taken me. She couldn't even get down with me. I had to go through the whole processing through the emergency room, all the different testings that were pretty extensive. I seriously thought that I could have died during that admission. I didn't have my daughter. I didn't have anybody familiar. Like, I feel so emotional right now because being in that hospital room was the loneliest and scariest moment that I felt since I last lost my husband. Like, that was the next huge loss that I had to endure. You know, I'm a woman of faith, and I remember just learning through church that, you know, Michelle, whenever you feel sad and you feel afraid, like, just call out to the Lord, you know, turn around and worship him. And that was what was helpful for me. And that room was so lonely that you could hear like a pin drop. I could hear my thoughts. And the whole time I just felt like there's got to be something better than this. I'm going to come through. I'm going to come through. I remember being in communication with Darlene saying, hey, Michelle, you got to do the work. You know, even if you're here, you got to focus on those tools that are helpful. What are the correct action steps? And I was able to do that. I recovered, got released from the hospital in about a week's time. That was a very long time to be admitted into a hospital. Came out, had to get reacclimated with, again, being alone, quarantined by myself for the next month and a half. But I have learned so much in this journey. And I knew that from there, with the relationships that was causing me the pain, that I had to do the work on it in order, again, to focus on what was happening in the bigger surroundings, like this pandemic, and how I was going to survive through it. So again, the tools that we're going to be sharing, these little stories, when I first came into this pandemic, and the ladies know that I talk about this a lot, we always are being reminded that people with pre-existing physical conditions are at risk for the virus. They're at risk for maybe not healing quickly, maybe even risk of dying because of the pre-existing conditions, the physical conditions. But I tell people, you know what? We can't forget that there was also the pre-existing conditions on the emotional side. There was those things that were taking place anyway, the breakups, the people getting sick, the loss of finances, children leaving off to college, whatever those different losses were already happening. And people were already feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty. So we're just bringing it back full circle again. And we just want to be able to share with you that a lot of the things we're feeling are no more natural because of the losses, and it's the grief journey that we are experiencing. So I'm going to turn it over to Lupi now, and she can go ahead and talk a little bit about where she's at right now with the pandemic.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, so boy, am I still grieving this pandemic, let me tell you. So, when this pandemic first started, I was in the process of moving into a new place. I moved out of my parents' house, and I was feeling a little conflicted, because I was like, wow, I'm excited. I finally get my own place, my own privacy. And then this pandemic hit, and, we had to quarantine, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm alone, right? I miss my family. I miss my mom just kind of coming in the room asking how my day went. And so there was that. I was going through a transition right when COVID started. And prior to COVID, I was living with my parents, and it was really work, home. We'd spend quality time as a family. And then I made the move. I moved down to a family compound, I have my own space. And then COVID hit. The place where I work at, a children's mental health clinic, we were closed. We were activated elsewhere at the hospital to help with COVID response. We were working long hours. And for me, now that I think about it, I was disturbing. And as Michelle mentioned earlier, STIRBs are short-term energy relieving behaviors. And I was grieving not being at home, so I kept busy. I worked long hours. I worked 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., sometimes later, because that's what worked. While I was up at the hospital, it was, boom, 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 getting one task done after another, communicating with whoever I needed to talk with to get things moving for the community efforts. And I would come home and I'm just exhausted. right? I come home and nobody's there to ask me how my day was. So there were times where I was grieving alone. There were times where I didn't pick up the phone to call because it was that mentality, Lupi, you decided to move, you can do it. You can prove it to your parents, right? But it was a big transition. And I feel like, I'm still going through that healing journey, right? Because we're still in COVID. It's still very much present in our communities, and we're all scared. I'm still scared. It's a scary thought, leaving home and not knowing what you're going to bring back to your own house, whether it's to your office, or to the park, right? You just never know. And just the uncertainty is what I feel a lot of us are scared of, because we kind of don't know what's happening next, right? There's no vaccine, there's no known cure, and it's just all these overwhelming feelings, right? And going back to Darlene's point about being grateful, right? I have to remind myself to not, feel the need to feel grateful that it could be worse, right? Going back to comparing our losses to other people, because it's definitely something that's hard to do. When I lost my grandmother on my mom's side, I was told by a few people, be grateful, don't feel too bad because your grandma on your dad's side is still alive, and at least you still have one grandma alive. And yes, I'm very grateful that I have my grandma and my mom on my dad's side alive with us here today, but I still miss my grandma on my mom's side, right? And so that was one of the biggest, things I was able to work through with the grief recovery method. Again, my grandma passed away in 2015, and it wasn't until 2019 where I was able to complete that loss, right? To talk about that relationship, because I was taught to be strong, be strong for your mom, and, be strong for other people who couldn't come to Saipan for the funeral. To grieve alone, right? I have a younger sister, and I had the mentality, I have to be strong for my mom. My sister can't see me crying, so I would grieve alone. I wouldn't talk about it, right? And then just keeping busy, whether it be at work or at school, again, trying to keep my mind off the loss, right? Until this day, even amidst COVID and the work I do with the families I see, I remind myself of that, right? I don't need to be strong for the family, right? Because I remind myself again, there's only so much I can do, right? And it's learning to hold my space and be comfortable with that, and to acknowledge my feelings, because again, we're all grieving, and it's completely natural. And yeah.
Thanks, Lupi. I just want to add in, Lupi, that was an amazing story, and you really hit all the myths that we've learned in grief recovery, right? The being strong, the being alone, the don't feel bad, and that's again, like I mentioned earlier, people will tell us, don't feel bad. This is a global pandemic. Why are you even thinking about that? You know what I'm saying? Like, get over that. Focus on this. And I just want to send my heartfelt condolences out to the families who have lost a loved one. I know that we are at 20 today. And, some of these people, again, we always look at the numbers because that's what we know when they report. But this is somebody's loved one in a time where you can't even have a funeral. And I know, like, for Guam and I'm sure CNMI and the other islands, funerals are also where the healing starts, because that's where we can gather and be together and just really comfort and console one another, and not being able to have the people that we love present with us. And we're, everyone is supposed to just accept it, right? So the reality is, okay, we want to accept that. So that's where the conflicting feelings come in again, like Dar mentioned earlier, the conflicting feelings of a change of a pattern or behavior. And when we look at that, funerals, we see thousands of people at the funerals. And now it is reserved for 10 of the most immediate family members, right? And I can't even, that, you guys, I can't. And it's a hard talk, right now, so we talk about the pandemic and what's going to happen. If I may just jump in,
Yes.
what are some of the tips that we want to be able to share is, first of all, we need to acknowledge, right? We need to acknowledge that we are experiencing grief, that when you don't want to wake up in the morning and you want to just sleep an extra hour because maybe you feel a little, discouraged, that is normal and natural. When you don't want to talk to people, even when you do want to talk to people, does that make sense? Like, sometimes I feel that way, like, gosh, I want to see people and I want to talk to people. When I get texts or when I get calls, I'm like, I'm not in the mood to talk to anybody. And it's like, I don't have that energy just to give to other people. So what I've learned through this and through the tools that I've also acquired through grief recovery is we have to acknowledge our place. We have to acknowledge the level that we are at. If it's going to mean setting up our own personal boundaries so that we are also protecting and taking care of ourselves, if it's going to mean, and this is going to be very difficult for the islanders and for families, if it's going to mean saying no to those extra things and extra commitments, right? Saying no goes against your belief system and your morals and value. Saying no is a very unpopular thing to do. And we're going to get people that are going to look at us like, wow, what is, you said yes to me all this time and now you're saying no. And it's not because I'm saying no because I want to be a selfish person, or I'm saying no because I don't want to be a helper. It's I'm saying no to you because I need to say yes to me first. And in order for me to get through this, I need to know where my boundaries and my limitations are. Again, because if I am not taking care of myself, there's no way that I'm going to be able to take care of the people that I love around me. So I just wanted to kind of plug that with your story. And thank you, Lupi, for sharing that.
Thank you. And if I may just add on to that, if there's one thing, among many things that the grief recovery method has taught me, it's really to speak my truth. And it's not easy, right? Going back to saying no, not because we don't want to help, but it's, I need to put me first, right? And it's having to adapt to that. And with COVID, things are changing by the minute, right? We wake up tomorrow and there's a new protocol we have to follow, or, it's just, things literally changed overnight. Things change within the hour, and we're kind of expected to just adapt and move and make ends meet. And it's very hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I hope you guys are seeing, it's the pattern that is happening here between Michelle and Lupe, in that they're sharing their vulnerabilities and they're sharing their stories. So they're being transparent. And, I'm seeing the chat kind of going through, and Kate will help us out with the questions and we're almost there. But I just saw a couple of things there, so I just wanted to address it. And one of them was to be strong. And Lupe mentioned that, right? She actually did mention many of the myths of grief. And that is one of maybe the most transformational for me when I took the grief recovery method, was learning that I didn't need to be strong, learning that I didn't need to grieve alone, learning that keeping busy only prolonged my ability to heal, learning that it's okay to feel bad, right? It really is okay to feel bad when you're going through something like this. And, I learned that you can't replace losses, right? A lot of people talk about replacing losses, right? For example, with me, and I always share this story because I love my grandmother. She's still alive. She's 93, I think, or 94 years old now. And she's a widow. She's been a widow for, I think, I don't know, maybe 17, 18 years, maybe even longer than that. And so I always looked to her as a source of leadership when it came to what it meant to be a widow. But one of the first things that she said to me early on when I lost Frank was, it's okay to go out and find a boyfriend because you're so young. And if it wasn't my grandmother, I think I would have taken big offense to that, right? Because I was not ready to go out there. But what I realized as I was going through my journey was that even when I did find someone else, it wasn't about replacing Frank, right? It was about moving forward in life and starting a new chapter. But you never forget the people that you lost, they're always in your heart and in your mind. Their memory will live on forever. And so when people tell you to replace the loss or to get over it or to find someone else, whether it is the death of a loved one or a breakup in a relationship, or we think about the kids and them losing a pet or a doll or things like that, we can never replace losses of things that have significant value and things that we love, things that mean something to us, right? Especially human beings. And so, again, I wanted to just bring that up and talk to you guys, about the need to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is where you're getting your courage. Vulnerability is where the strength comes from. So when someone tells you to be strong, what they're really telling you is to not feel. What they're really telling you is that your human emotions of sadness, of fear, of anger, of all of those bad feelings other than joy and excitement and things like that, is they're telling you that your emotions are making them uncomfortable. So you need to be strong. And it's not ever with ill intent. So, please understand that when someone tells you all of these different things, be strong, keep busy, don't feel bad, all of these things, it's never from a place of ill intent. It always comes from a place of love. But they tell us all the wrong things because even we believe all those wrong things, right? And that's why we call it the myths of grief. Michelle also talked a little bit during her story about STIRBs, right? Short-term energy relieving behaviors. And STIRBs are things that we do to numb, to self-medicate, to pretend that our grief is not affecting us, to pretend that we're not feeling any of those human emotions. And in the midst of this pandemic, when we're all stuck at home with our families 24/7, I tell you what, you guys can probably come up with a ton of things that you are STIRBing with, right? Eating a lot, binge watching Netflix or whatever you're watching, streaming movies online, drinking alcohol, maybe oversleeping, sleeping too much. There's many things that people do to forget about what is in front of them, to forget about what is making them feel a certain way. And that is what we call short-term energy relieving behaviors in the grief recovery method, or as we refer to them as STIRBs. And it's okay to STIRB for a moment, as long as you can identify what that is, and as long as it's not going to be harmful to you or to the people around you. For example, when my husband died, my STIRB was shopping. It wasn't harmful in the beginning until I started to spend a ton of money that I didn't need to spend. Then it started to affect my finances, right?
Yeah.
But again, or even working out. I've talked to many different people that I've worked with through the method, and overworking out, like going to the gym 2 or 3 times a day, punching, a bag, or doing heavy aerobics, weight training, doing something because it's releasing that emotional energy, right? That's what emotions are all about. It's all about the energy that we're exuding. And so when we suppress our emotions, we are not allowing that energy to come out. And we refer to this in the grief recovery method as a tea kettle or a pressure cooker. So if you think about that, right, those of you that maybe come from an era that I come from, that generation where, your parents put one of those tea kettles on the stove, right? They get to warm up the water for the coffee. Yeah. And then when it steams or when the whistle blows, you know that the water's hot enough, right? That is what you're doing to your body when you are suppressing your emotions. And that steam is building up and it's building up and it's building up. And what happens then is that you now are going to have human emotions that are going to spin out of control. And you're wondering, where did that come from? Why did I get triggered by anger? Why did I have a panic attack? Why did I cry all of a sudden? Like that wasn't even something to cry about. That is your physical body telling you that you've got all of these human emotions that are stuck inside of you that need to come out, and they're going to burst out. It was one of the things that I knew early on in my journey of grieving, that I had human emotions that were spinning out of control, and I did not know how to shut it down. Right? That's what I thought I needed to do. I thought I needed to shut it down. And when I realized that what I needed to do was allow it to flow through me, then that's when I started to feel better. That's when the pressure was being released from my body. I no longer was this hot steam of a kettle or a pressure cooker that was happening anymore, right? It wasn't this walking time bomb anymore. And so, I want you guys to think about where you're at in your journey and what, are some of the things that you're experiencing in your own physical body. The other thing is all of the thoughts that are running through our head. And during this pandemic, many people stay plugged into the news. And I love the news. I think it's amazing to keep us updated. But remember that there are so many things out there that all of a sudden everyone's an expert, right? Everyone's an expert. And so people are trying to figure out what is true and correct. We teach in the grief recovery method that you need to either be right or happy, right? So you don't always need to be right, right? You're sacrificing your ability to be happy by always trying to find the right answers. You don't have to be, right? You don't have to try and figure out, why am I sad? Why am I angry? Why am I scared? Just acknowledge that you're sad, that you're scared, that you're angry. It doesn't even matter where it's coming from. Just allow those feelings to process through you, right? And then when you're ready to do work on yourself, when you realize that you've got all of these emotions that you're trying to deal with, then you can find someone, find an expert. I always tell people that we can't walk this journey alone, guys. That's why we say grieving alone is a myth of grief, because we should not be walking this journey alone. And many of us, have a hard time even trying to wrap our head around all of these feelings that we're having and how do we even process it. That's why I love what we do in the method, is because it's step by step and we walk you through this process. One of the things that we learned also through the grief recovery method, and you saw that video that I showed earlier, a man there named Russell Friedman, God rest his soul. Russell left us in 2016. He died of cancer. But Russell always said that when your heart is broken, your head doesn't work right. So think about yourself. If you've ever dealt with stress, if you've ever dealt with the loss of a loved one, if you ever dealt with big challenges in your life, overwhelming human emotions, and then you go to work and you find it difficult to concentrate, or you make mistakes, right, all the time. Or as a widow, right, Michelle and I, probably use this term a lot in the beginning of our journey, widow fog, right, where we just walk down the hallway. We forget what we're walking down the hallway for, and we turn around because it's like, okay, what were we going down there to get? And you forget, right? Your heart is broken, so your head is not working right. We do things and we say things because we're so busy trying to stuff up those human emotions that it's affecting our mental capability to think straight or to act a certain way, or to even interact with people, in a way that makes either you or them feel comfortable. And so grief is like that. So imagine in this place of this quarantine, and everybody is at home because you don't have a choice, right? You don't have a choice but to stay at home. And so now what we're realizing is that people are now starting to get that they have human emotions and they've got this stuff going on in their mind that they have no idea how to wrap their head around. And now they have no escape. They can't just go for a drive. They can't just, get, some space between them and their family. And I've had a lot of people ask me that. How do we do that? I love my family, but I'm really having a hard time being around them all this time, right? We appreciate our family when they're not with us, right? It's like you're work all day and you're like, man, I never have time for my family. Well, guess what, guys? Now you have time for your family, and now it's more than enough time, right? A lot of you are saying that, and you know what? Don't feel bad about feeling like that. It's okay to feel like your space, your personal space is being compromised. It's okay to feel that I don't want to be around them 24/7. There's nothing wrong with you. You're human, right? You're absolutely human. And so, I think that's the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge that the human emotions that we are feeling is all perfectly normal and natural. So I am not privy to what's going on in the island. So I want, Michelle and Lupe to share, because of this lockdown, because of this quarantine, what are some of the things that you're experiencing? And based on the people that you interact with or talk to, or see through social media or talk to on the phone, what are some of the things that people are experiencing in the islands, and how can we help them, right now before, they decide that they want to get help, or maybe, they're not ready for it? What can we help them with right now, during this time, because of what the islands are facing.
Yeah, I definitely know that many people are really on survival mode right now, right? Aside from the fogginess and the confusion of what's happening, a lot of privileges have been pretty much temporarily taken away, so to speak. I almost like to say, I said it once in one of the live shows I did. It's almost as if being with your friends and family and social gathering is illegal, and who would have ever thought that that could, be where we're at? So there's a lot of mixed emotions. People are very uncertain. I also have noticed that, sometimes when we're going through a very difficult time, we want to find the source to just kind of pinpoint and say, this is where it's coming from. And it almost takes away the responsibility from me as an individual. But I do know that learning again in grief recovery is, things around us may not be, we are not able to control it. But if we're able to just be willing to take 1% of the responsibility, right? To heal, to recover, to do the correct action steps so that we can keep our stuff going. Because I truly honestly believe that better days are coming, better days are ahead. And in order for us to live through that, we have to again recognize what's going on. And so some of the things that I hear people do, my daughter, so thankfully my daughter is back, everyone, and I'm so happy for that. When I was in the hospital room, I realized that nothing in the world mattered to me. Money didn't matter to me. The home didn't matter to me. The cars, all of those different things. Because if we were to just pass away today, like, what is that going to matter? But our loved ones, right? And so when my daughter was able to come back a few months ago, I was so grateful that she's here. But even at that, there's just two of us in the household, and she actually gets a little bit more antsy and irritated by me than I of her. Like, I love to be around her. She's really my self-care. I like to be around her and do silly videos on Snapchat. And I don't even post it. I just look at it when I'm feeling real down, and I go back to those videos. It makes me really happy. But what she does on the daily, and she never misses, and she's always like, Mom, come on, you need to get on the ball, is she really ensures that she continues to eat right? So she meal preps and she does all of that stuff, making sure that she gets the nutrition that she needs again, because we know that we need to have a stronger immune system to fight this virus. So she's taking that little action step. Another thing that she does is she works out at least 4 times a day. And it's just around where we live. So again, what I've noticed, and I use my daughter because she's so young, right? And a lot of times, like, I know that if it's affecting me as a middle-aged woman, it's definitely affecting our youth that are just so used to being out and about and doing whatever they want on the normal times. But with her, what I have noticed is that she has really shifted her mindset. And I'm really impressed, because sometimes, honestly, I really have to look at her for motivation and encouragement. But she basically turns things around and really looks at what she has in front of her and is grateful about that, and then takes those next steps. But don't get me wrong, because there are many times where she really disappears into her room. She's like, Mom, I need alone time. So, we're able to manage. Other people have, again, I see like a lot of people have been doing live shows on Instagram, on Facebook, just trying to deliver a positive, encouraging message, sharing some of their own self-care activities. For me, guys, what I've recognized in this whole pandemic is, sometimes I think this is the most perfect time to really, really think about what being still means. And I have never been this still in all my life. But what I have learned was to really, truly be still. And this weekend was a long weekend. And I was really, I was bombarded with sad news after sad news. I found out that a loved one is really sick. And then I found out that somebody else, again, died. And then we have the secondary information that we're hearing from other people in the community. But I really just hung out in my bed, and I processed and I took some naps, and I woke up and I stayed where I needed to be, because honestly, I did not have the intellectual space to get up and do my daily routines. Thank goodness it was a 3-day weekend. So I allowed myself to do that. And then come yesterday, it was time to get back, because I'm teleworking right now. I'm like, okay, I need to refocus, reshift. I was able to refresh. So it's looking at those little things, being creative again, talking to your family, creating a chat group. But be careful about that too, because sometimes chat groups could be just an outlet for a lot of negative energy as well. So, you know, take a look at that, see if it's not helpful from you. You can always, and I think someone shared it today on their Facebook post. It was one of the quotes that one of the gas station posts on a weekly, saying something like, you can delete, you can unsubscribe, right? You can leave. So I'm talking about social media and how that happens, because part of the self-care too is picking the social media outlets that is going to be more beneficial than you to you. So that's just some of the things that have been working in my household and from other people that I have been encountering.
Awesome. How about you, Lupe?
Alrighty, some of the things that I've noticed about, you know, just our community, a lot of this pandemic, I really think of our parents or the caregivers who are teleworking or having, you know, to wear multiple hats, and schools are slowly starting to open. So it's, you know, now they're the teacher, now they're the cafeteria person, now they're the tutor. And then they also have to get work done required by them, by their, you know, by their boss. And, you know, I've heard a few stories about, you know, from some parents saying, you know, there are days where he just cries, or it's endless needs, or she's constantly asking for me. She wants, you know, she wants to sit on my lap. I'm trying to attend a webinar, a Zoom call, and my kids are just there. And, you know, what I share back with families is your kids know when you're hurting. If you're feeling afraid, your kids can feel it. Man, because kids, you know, they're very observant, and they are very good about telling us and communicating their grief. And, you know, we don't realize it until we teach them otherwise, right? On, you know, to not feel bad, you know, stop crying, you know, don't cry, don't do this, don't feel bad, or, you know, here's the phone, or here's a new toy to keep busy, right? So it's reinforcing those myths, which we don't want to do. Rather, you know, we want to communicate, right? And, you know, in grief recovery, we start, you know, we always encourage starting with ourselves first, right? Talk to your kids, communicate, say those feeling words, you know, which is a hard thing to do, right? Because when we think about our culture, it's don't ask, don't tell, right? What happens in this household stays in this household. When you walk out there, it's, you know, put a smile on your face. Nobody needs to know what happened an hour ago. And again, it's learned behavior. And I had to, you know, I learned all this going through the method, and it's a challenge, you know. Our parents were teaching us what they knew best, right? And, you know, it's not that they didn't know better, it's what worked for them, right? And, you know, with this pandemic, there's so much fear, and our kids are just overwhelmed, right? And so, you know, I bring the kids up because they are the ones I feel for the most. You know, we have some kids in daycare, you know, some kids in kindergarten who are having to do virtual learning, right? So what that looked like for a 4-year-old last year, boy, times are different now, right? They're having to sit in front of the screen and possibly thinking to themselves, like, this is school, this is what I've waited for, right? When my older sister or older brother came home sometime last year, it was nothing like this whenever they talk about school. And so I feel like that's one of the biggest changes that a lot of people are grieving right now. And, you know, just, and, you know, thinking about all the different systems in place. You know, they're grieving too. They're having to change their routines and protocols. Teachers are having to change lesson plans and get more creative on how to engage their students through a screen, right? And it's tough, but there are ways to deal with it. And, you know, like Michelle said, it's to take action, and not, you know, not keep it down, right? Not to hold on to all that grief and all those conflicting feelings, because it'll, you know, it'll just come out in ways you never thought imagined. Yeah.
It'll, right? It's like a volcano just erupting after so many different events taking place in your life. And Lupi, thank you so much for bringing that up with the kids, because, you know, my daughter is college level, but she struggles with online school. And then I know the parents, it's not just reserved to parents with small children. They need our help too. I'm still being sought for help. And I'm like, hang on, you know, let me Google that for you, right? Yeah. So it is a difficult time. The hats that we were already wearing back then, now we have about 10 additional hats that we have. And it, like you said, in moment to moment, minute to minute, those hats can change. We're playing the professional at our jobs, then we're the mom, then we're the, you know, the person that has to go out and fetch the medication for our elderly parents, right? Or their appointments. And there's a lot of conflicting emotions and a lot of conflicting feelings that people are dealing with, because we know we have to follow the quarantine and the orders, the executive orders, but we also want to be there for the family that we love. We want to be able to take them on their runs to, you know, the store to purchase certain things. And so now we're left with like, okay, do I violate the order first of all, right? Do I risk my own life and be exposed to these people, or do I risk their life and expose them if I don't know if I'm exposed? And, you know, you tell that to my 80-year-old mom and she'll look at you like, what are you talking about? I just need to go buy some groceries. I need to get out of this house. Like, you guys don't love me? How come nobody's coming over to visit? Right? So
Exactly.
Where do we go from there? Where do we go from there? And every man is at a different level. So, you know, in saying all of this, self-care is really important. One of the things I want to leave behind to everybody that's on the Zoom call and that's listening live, guys, is, you know, Lupi said it, it's giving it a voice, right? Many times we're told, if you talk about it, it's going to get worse. But I truly believe that if we don't talk about it, it gets worse. And if we don't talk about it, that's when the risk gets higher, right? That's when substance use kind of overcomes. That's when domestic violence takes place. That's when suicidal ideations and the thoughts of suicide come to mind. That's when mental health issues start to get worse. The anxiety worsens, the depression worsens. So there's no easy fix. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of courage to isolate. There's a lot of courage that you have to, because we're not built like that. We're not built to isolate, right? No man is an island. But if we're using that courage to isolate and not reach out to anybody, I also say there's courage, and you have that courage to be able to connect, right? Because the opposite of isolation is connection, and to reach out. And again, there's many times where we want to help, but we don't know how. And because we don't talk openly about our feelings, we don't want to air our dirty laundry. Many of the helpers feel like they're walking on eggshells, that they're uncertain. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I say something to offend? What if they think I'm being, you know, in Guam, we say business tao, right? Or in Biniquera, we're being nosy. But I truly believe that we should be nosy, guys. We should totally be nosy. And we should do those check-ins, you know? And even if we don't have the answers, it's finding the supports, finding the places like the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, finding the supports like the Ipanangin campus suicide team out of the University of Guam, the East Psychological Services, calling the crisis hotline at 647-8833. And I know we also have a national hotline. So those of you that are not on Guam, you can also call the national hotline. I believe we're going to put that up on the screen. But the resources are there. And it's just a matter of taking that first courageous step, right? Because courage does not mean the absence of fear. I truly believe that it does not mean. A lot of times I do things and I am so afraid. But to me, courage just leads you to faith and hope, right? That you're going to be able to come out of whatever that darkness is, again, to get into the light. So talk about it, right? That's why we're called Grief Talk, because we're really talking about some of those hard topics to discuss.
And I want to, you know, just add on a little bit to what Michelle is saying about, you know, opening up those lines of communication and, you know, make sure that you're talking it out. But one of the things that I do know about people is that we're afraid to talk to others because of the fear of judgment. and also the fear of people telling us how to feel. And so my tip for you in that space is to make sure that if you're the person that someone is coming to you to be able to be what we call in grief recovery a heart with ears, then you need to truly be that heart with ears. Most people that are going through something difficult in their lives are not looking for you to fix them, right? We always say grievers don't need to be fixed, they just need to be heard. And so it's important that if you're the listener, that you're listening with a heart with ears and you're not there to judge them or to even give them advice unless they're asking you for it. Now, on the other side of that, if you're the person that's coming into this conversation because you need someone to be your heart with ears, I always want to tell people, and this is what has worked for me, is that you begin that conversation with intention, right? Because if you walk into a conversation and not tell people what you need from them, automatically, right, we are almost all wired to say, they need my help. What kind of advice can I give them? And so the person that is listening to you is not listening to you. They're just thinking of a way to help you, right? So they're not actively and wholeheartedly listening to you. So if you start your conversation with intention and say, hey, can I tell you something? And can you just be my heart with ears? Or can you just listen to me without offering anything? I don't need you to say anything. I just need you to listen. When you do that, you take it away from them, the need to give you advice. And honestly, like that's the best gift you can give someone that is listening to you, because now they can truly listen and not have to worry about how can I help them? What kind of advice can I give them? Because usually the advice is don't feel that way. So they're telling you how to feel, and then now they're judging how you feel. So they're asking you to minimize or compare your losses to others or to themselves to make you feel better. But it quite the opposite happens, right? So that is my tip about the communication piece: is start the conversation with intention. And then now you guys know, right? Just be a heart with ears. Don't judge. Don't tell someone how to feel. Don't minimize or compare those different losses that are going on in your life. So with that, I want to ask Kate to unmute, and Kate is going to she's going to be our question person. So Kate, if you can let us know what kind of questions came in from the chat, and then Michelle, if you can unmute yourself as well, I'm going to ask you and Lupe to chime in and answer some of those questions. These are all questions coming from the island, so you guys, I think, would be best to answer those questions other than myself.
Okay,
Sure.
half a day, everyone. I'm Kate Baltazar Dodge, also a certified grief recovery specialist. We have a question here. It's kind of a two-part question for the panel. What advice do you have for the people of the CNMI who have collectively experienced at least 3 traumatic experiences in just the past 5 years? Typhoon Sodalor, Super Typhoon U2, and now this pandemic. Many of us hadn't yet even recovered from one before the next trauma hit. This is on top of everyone's personal losses. Our culture, tradition, and even present society keeps telling us to be strong, and it is ending up with many pushing their emotions down. At what point will we all be too tired to continue being strong?
Wow. Lupi, would you like to take that? Being from the island, you might have something to offer, and then I can chime in.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start off with the last part of that question with at what point will we all be too tired to continue being strong? My first thought is, if we're asking ourselves that, we are tired of being strong. Because again, what is that supposed to look like, right? And you're right, having to experience 2 major typhoons and now this pandemic, it is one after the other. We're having to constantly make adjustments. And, for me, it's about honoring your space. And honoring your space and taking time to reflect on your feelings and where you're at. Because we can sit, and one of the other myths is about time heals all wounds, right? We can sit and wait and wait and wait for help to come around, whatever that looks like. But if we don't take the action to help ourselves first, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally, we're just going to keep waiting, right? The grief will still be there. And time does not heal all wounds. Guys, it's been how many years since Super Typhoon Sodelor? I think about 5 years. U2 happened in 2018. There are still so many families grieving, still having to adjust to a lot of the losses they experienced, right? Their homes, some their schools, everything, right? And having to work to get all that back, and this pandemic hits, and everything's shut down, right? And then we're forced to stay home and grieve, but find some beautiful heart with ears, who can give you that safe space, because keeping it in and not talking about it will take a toll. And I learned that the hard way, I would tell you. So I'm very grateful for this grief recovery method. Yeah.
Thank you, Lupi.
Yeah.
The next question is, how can we get others to understand that not everyone can be strong in the way they are expecting?
Very good question, to the person who asked that question. I love that question because it really is a testament of your strength to even ask that question, because many of us resonate with that. When I was going through my grief journey, and I still am, that was one of the things. My daughter was 11 years old when my husband passed away. I was a young widow. And what had happened was everyone was like, Michelle, you have to be strong. You have to be strong for your daughter. And, to be honest with you, I wasn't strong. I didn't know how to be strong. Everyone kept telling me to be strong, but they weren't telling me how to be strong. And I remember one time that it just kind of like erupted into, I really felt like a disrespectful daughter, because I had a quarrel with my mom about it. And it was, the family shifted the protection to my daughter because she was 11, she lost her father. So a lot of times she got away with the different ways of that she was grieving her behaviors. And to me, it was really contradicting the way I was parenting, and it wasn't being helpful. And I remember one time I erupted, and I was like, you know what? Like, this is not only about her. This is about me. Like, I lost a husband. And so, because I bottled it up and because I was pretending to be a strong person, it resulted in a burst of anger. And later on, I felt really, really bad about it. But absolutely, being strong, the first thing you want to tell people is that you don't have to be strong. You don't have to accept that myth. And that's what I've learned. I've learned to tell people right now, today is not a good day for me. I'm a hot mess and I'm working through it and I'm not strong. And that's why I need you. And that's why I need God. And that's why I need the other supports and services and resources around me, because I cannot do this by myself to be strong. So I think the first thing to do is acknowledge that you are not, and do not accept it, and respectfully just let them know again, because chances are you're going to be also relieving them of that mindset that they have to be strong as well. So you're giving each other permission to say we can be vulnerable, because really vulnerability equals strength as well. So that's kind of like my thoughts on that question.
Okay, and the next question is, what does it mean when you feel more emotions about the typhoons and all the loss experience than we do about all the relatives we've lost since then?
Who wants to take that?
I have something at the top of my head. To me, I just feel like that is unresolved grief as well, right? Because the typhoons have happened before. And I'm not sure if you are referring to the deaths during the pandemic or just deaths in general. But a lot of times too, when we go through the natural disasters, and if we're trying to just survive on our own, we don't, our home is not at 100%, maybe like we don't have full power just yet. And I know when I was in Saipan in 2018, 2019, I think last year, U2 had just hit, you guys were recovering from that. And I believe half the island was displaced. And I remember driving around the island, and people they had tents, temporary shelters, and there was no power to a lot of homes. It was really disrupted. And so that grief weighs so heavily if you're just trying to manage, you know, your home front, right? Let alone think about all the relatives that are passing, and it just kind of compounds onto one another. But one of the things that you would do is, again, finding a way to express that. And your honesty today, just in that question, I think, again, that's a very courageous step, is to basically say that, say it out loud, because now you're going to be able to set a safe platform for maybe the individuals that are also affected and impacted by what you had just asked.
And I like to add to that, Michelle. You know, our relationships are different with everyone and everything. And so when we think about our own losses, it's to not compare those losses, whether it be from a typhoon or the death of a loved one. Those relationships are different. What we lost during a typhoon may have hit a little harder than losing a loved one, right? And that's okay. You know, honor that space and honor those feelings, because they're 100% real in that moment. And so, yeah, don't compare losses.
Great. Okay. The next question for the panel is, how are we supposed to react when we see all these people moving on as if these devastating typhoons didn't take away our home, our money, our way of life, our faith, our confidence, our lives?
I think that comes back, I'll go into this one. I think that comes back to what Lupe had said earlier about comparing losses. And so what we're living in today in this world of COVID-19 is a shared experience. But the emotions that we feel are all individual and unique to each of us. So for those of you guys in the CNMI and experiencing typhoon after typhoon, and then now this pandemic and the loss of so many different things, the loss of loved ones, the loss of finances, the loss of homes, you know, you experience during the typhoons, the loss of power, the loss of water, the loss of so many different things as a result of the circumstances around you, right? So your environment created these events that you don't have control of. And so whether it's a pandemic, a typhoon, you lost your job, you lost a loved one, it doesn't even matter. A loss is a loss, right? We always say that grief is grief. There's a lot of people out there that will label and say anticipatory grief, or, you know, a different type of grief. You know, just like with Michelle and I, we're labeled as widows. And so we've got widow grief. Grief is grief, guys. It's the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. It's all about the conflicting feelings caused by the end of a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So honor your space. Don't compare yourself to other people and how they're reacting to the events that you all share, right? Because again, the events are shared, but the human emotions that you're feeling are all different. And so someone may be able to get through this faster than you. That's okay for them, and make your space okay for you. Because once you start comparing your losses or judging others for moving forward, and we never want to say move on, right? We always want to say moving forward. And a lot of times it's just changing a few words that can make a huge difference, right? We say completion versus closure. We say moving forward instead of moving on. And those words are impactful when you think about your healing journey. So don't compare how you're dealing with it versus how someone else is dealing with it. And if you feel that you're that person that is still going through a tough time and others are not, then I want to suggest that you find someone to talk to, get help, whether it be, you know, a counselor, a therapist, a grief recovery specialist. We have 5 of them on the island. You know, someone that can help guide you through your healing journey. Because I'm going to guess that it's not just about the events or the environment that is creating your grief. There's so much more grief that happened maybe prior in your life that you maybe never dealt with. And so now it's just compounding over each other, right? So now you're this tea kettle or this pressure cooker of emotions and of loss after loss after loss that maybe you have not been able to deal with effectively because you never had the tools to do that. So hopefully that helps.
Absolutely.
The next question is, how can we be both truthful and strong?
I think being truthful is strong, and being strong is being truthful, right? And again, you know, a lot of times our belief system is that we wear this hat. I actually know we call it in grief recovery the Academy Award winning grief. What is it called? Grief recovery actress,
Recovery. Yeah.
right? Academy. And I played that role. Everyone thought like I had a superhero cap on. Everyone thought that I had like Wonder Woman shields and so on and so forth, because they looked at me and they're like, oh my gosh, like you are healed, like you didn't even have a loss. And I think part of that I take responsibility too, because I pretty much every single day when I woke up a hot mess after crying all night and my eyes were all, you know, puffy, I dressed up and I showed up and I put on my superhero outfit because that's what I wanted people to see me as. That's how I wanted them to see me. And I found out that when I was able to strip all of that, it actually gave me breathing room to be who I truly was. It gave me breathing room to grow even more, to not always be so hard and put those expectations right on myself, because expectations, as we learn again in grief recovery, are planned disappointments. So vulnerability, we have learned how to really just kind of like break out of our shell, so to speak. We've learned how to be authentic. We've learned how to speak our truth. We've learned how to be vulnerable. And a lot of times it's like, hey guys, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm not exempt from all of this stuff. And there's going to be sometimes I'm going to be in my own human emotions, and I'm going to go, I like to call it where you just kind of just go off the deep end, right? And there are many times, and I'm going to tell you this, in my grief journey, that I get so frustrated and angry. And I tell Dara, I make a joke about this all the time. I'm like, man, today I just want to key a car, you know? And don't take that literally, but that's the extent of my feeling. Like, it's so intense. But because I said that out, she's like, okay, Michelle, let's do some work. So it's about really recognizing those feelings and not being ashamed to say where you're at. I always told my daughter, it's one thing to feel a certain way. You own your feelings, okay? Whether they be true or real, but the behavior is a different story, right? And then the behavior now is hurt people. If we don't take care of ourselves, it'll manifest in behaviors that can actually, you know, project on others and be hurtful to other people.
The next question is, whenever I speak about my past experiences or a loss of a loved one, I cry. I can never tell my story without crying. I see you ladies sharing your stories and sharing them with so much strength, and I can't do that. Does this mean I'm still grieving?
Let me just chime in, and then probably Michelle or Lucy might want to chime in as well. Look, we're all grievers. If you're a human being and you're living and breathing, you're a griever. We grieve many different things throughout our life. It's the unresolved grief that I'm going to guess that you are dealing with right now. And so we may appear to what you define as strong. And for us, it is about healing. So our strength that you see here in this grief talk, because we can talk about our stories without crying, it didn't come with blood, sweat, and tears doing the work to get us through this healing, through the other side, to see the light and hope. It did not come, you know, without having to pay a price, right? And so I'm going to guess that you are dealing with all of this unresolved grief, because again, grief is all normal and natural. So acknowledge and honor your feelings. And if you feel that you're consistently in this place of sadness and crying all the time, then there is definitely some things that we can help you work through, or find someone. If you're in Saipan, there's some help in Saipan. And then we definitely have some other resources in Guam. Again, grief recovery is an option, guys. There's so much other resources out there as well. So do what's right for you. But I want to suggest that you talk to someone about that.
Thank you. For the next question, we have, for those just experiencing grieving a loss, what are the steps you have to help get through that loss to eventually accept it and be able to live a normal life? How do you find acceptance of a loss?
Ladies, some of you want to take that?
Yeah. So for me, one of the hardest things, I think I accepted that my husband passed away the moment I discovered him. Um, and you know, accepting it was one thing, because it's not like I could bring him back to life, right? Talking about the normal now, gosh, just like this pandemic, the catchphrase now is the new normal, right? We've learned that also in grief recovery. I had to learn a lot of different things. I had to learn how to take the trash out. I had to learn how to fill the water jugs. I had to learn how to pay the bills. I had to learn how to take care of property taxes and insurance and all of those different things, because those were things that I didn't do. So in dealing with the loss for acceptance, everybody's a little bit different, right? One of the things we learned too is, you know, how, if you ever heard of the stages of grief, and like, I think the first stage in that was denial. We learned that the stages of grief is not really meant to be a one size fits all steps of getting through it and recovering through your grief. And it's not really denial, but it's disbelief. This belief that this person that is my loved one, that I've been with for 14 years, is no longer going to be there. I'm going to be waking up for the rest of my life without this person by my side. I'm going to have to be a single parent now. I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to support myself, because that additional income that was taken away is, you know, I'm going to be having to adjust my lifestyle because of that. So acceptance is one thing, disbelief is another thing, and then the new normal. But once again, like we mentioned, it's never too soon to start your healing. And once you get your heart around just reaching out, because we got to be careful too, culturally, sometimes it's hard to be the receiver, right? We're always the caregivers. We always want to be there to help and support other people. And then when tragedies in our lives or losses take place, everyone else wants to come and help us. And we're so used to being the person providing care and support that maybe we might feel ashamed, or we might feel like a burden to receive some of that help. So part of moving forward and acceptance is also allowing other people to come in and be a part of your grief journey, if it's beneficial for you.
Right. If I can add also to that, you're using the word acceptance. And so I think a lot of times when people use that word acceptance, that just tells us that you're serving. You're using short-term energy relieving behaviors to numb, to self-medicate, to ignore what really is in front of you. And to Michelle's point, it's disbelief more than it is acceptance. So especially if it's the death of a loved one, it happened. You can't deny that it happened, right? If there are events that are happening in your life in the middle of a pandemic, we can't deny that we're in the middle of this pandemic. And so it's not about accepting the loss. I think it's really more about what do you do to deal with your human emotions, to allow them to process through you. And then just acknowledge, like Michelle says, acknowledge where you're at in that space, and then change the word, right? Maybe you're in disbelief. Maybe you're in a place of not wanting to deal with your emotions because it hurts too much. You get that. A broken heart does not feel good. It's so different from having physical pain. Physical pain can be fixed by a doctor. It can be fixed through, pain medication. A broken heart, there is no medication for a broken heart. And if you're taking some sort of medication to help with some of those human emotions that you're going through for a short period of time, then I want to encourage you to make sure that you're getting some help to heal through that, because human emotions are so normal and natural to feel, but we as human beings treat it like it's not normal and natural. And so we do everything in our power not to feel it. But at the end of the day, it's in your physical body. Your body knows that it's there. And at some point it's going to come out, and it might not be very nice when it comes out. So please do yourself a favor and accept your loss, if that's the word that you use, and get some help.
Yes.
Okay, the next question is, how do you safely and effectively approach your family about generational struggles, addiction, and issues? Our culture is very dust under the rug, don't embarrass the family oriented.
I can
Yeah,
share
that's
some
that.
thoughts.
Okay, Luffy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, I can speak for what has worked for me, because you're right, our culture plays plays a big role, or, it's a big factor in what we can or can't do, or share with the rest of the world. And, what helped me was, it really goes back to speaking your truth. When I came back from going through grief recovery, my family asked about it. And I was very honest. I was like, guys, are you sure you want to know about it? Because, I can share tons of information, but I need to know if you're ready. Because, again, grief is normal and natural. It's the conflicting feelings, and being comfortable, to have that conversation and create that space so that I myself am prepared for what they're about to ask me and say to me, was helpful, to find comfort in what I knew I believed in, and then expressing that, right? And then helping them understand where I came from, really, and how the grief recovery had helped me, some of the experiences, and tools that I got to use. That way they were able to get a better idea or get a picture and from where I was coming from. And of our culture, especially our elders, it's very hard to change our elders' minds and perspectives about different things. And I've come across a few people, where I've shared my experience and awareness about grief recovery, and they don't agree. And that's okay with me, right? Because I've accepted that I can't change everybody's mind, right? Especially the elders. They grew up a certain way. It's learned behavior, and it's very difficult to do. And yeah, accepting that was what helped me. Yeah.
The next question is, what are signs or behaviors others may exhibit that are not going through loss well, and the advice you can give them in order to help them?
I'll definitely take that. I also work, like I mentioned, for the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. And I just want to acknowledge Dr. Christiana Whitman, who is our project director for the Guam Focus on Life project, which is a federal grant under the GBHWC that works with, implements prevention programs and collaborates with different partnerships in the community. And so, back to that, and people will call it signs. What are some signs? I've learned in my work in suicide prevention and just with grief and loss, it's invitation. So first of all, you want to even look at that loss event, right? Is it a divorce? If someone's going through a divorce, that's reason enough that's a sign already. That's something, remember back to grief, that there's going to be a conflicting feeling of the change of a pattern or behavior. So divorce, even if it's coming out of maybe perhaps an abusive relationship, or maybe it's just one of those things that didn't work, right? There's still loss involved. There's still going to be possibly custody battles. There's still going to be a loss again of income. Maybe they have to talk about assets and things like that, but also just perhaps even the relational, just the daily interactions that are taking place. There's going to be a loss, a sense of loss. Your last name will change if you're a woman, different things like that. So the event itself is reason enough to kind of make that flag go up for us to just say, hey, I just want to let you know that I know that you experience something that's difficult. Divorce is not normal or natural. It doesn't happen, to everybody on the daily. And I just want to know, like, how's that been like for you? How's that been like for you? And if the person comes back and starts telling, then that's kind of like your cue to see if they might need additional helps and supports. Because usually when you give them permission to tell their story and you're the heart with ears, and no mouth, and you're sitting there listening and not trying to fix, you'll be able to discover some things, but also the person that's going through it will be able to kind of unfold their own wisdom in what their next steps might be. So that's just one of the first indications. Another thing that I say that I have learned is there's top 2 things that you would always want to look out if a person is going through some kind of distress in their life. You watch out for their eating patterns and their sleeping patterns. Some people will eat more, some people will eat less, some people won't eat at all. Other people will sleep more, sleep less, or not sleep at all. So when you kind of see those two things happening, also withdrawing from friends and family that they love, and also withdrawing from hobbies and things that they love to do, because that's when the withdrawing and the isolation begins. So those are just some of it's not all of the signs that are out there. There's many different things, but those are some of the more common ones to look out for.
The next question is, what advice do you have for young children and teenagers going through the loss of a parent?
Okay, I think I can take that one. Although my kids were adults when my husband died, I had grandchildren, and so it was definitely something that we needed to take notice of and be mindful of what our little humans are seeing and feeling, because I always say that our children are not any less human than we are as adults. And Lupe said it earlier, that children will sense how we feel, and they a lot of times will mimic it. So it really depends on the age of the child. But the younger the children, the more authentic they are with their human emotions. The older they get, it's already learned behavior from what we taught them. And as parents, I'm a mom of three. I look at what I know now with grief recovery, and I have a lot of regrets about how I raised my children. But I have an opportunity now to coach and guide them through how they raise their children with what I know with grief recovery and with human emotion in general. And so we always say in grief recovery that we go first. As the leader, you go first. So as the parent, you're the leader, so you go first. When you share your human emotions with them, they will then feel safe and comfortable to share theirs. But if you're teaching them that it's not good to share it, to be strong, as most of us were taught how to do, to go and grieve alone, because that's what we were also taught to do, that's exactly what the children are going to do. So if you want to give anything to your kids in the world that we live in today, the best gift that you can give them is to be authentic and vulnerable with your own feelings. Teach them that human emotions are all very normal and natural to feel. Don't judge them. If they're scared about something, tell them it's okay to be scared. Don't tell them to be strong. Don't tell them that you shouldn't be scared of the dark. These are the things that we teach our kids, that they take and they translate. As they journey through their life, they're going to translate it differently from a kid, from a toddler to a child to a teenager. The beliefs that we teach them early on are going to translate differently, but it all comes back to the myths that we talked about in the beginning of this talk. Be strong, grieve alone, keep busy, replace the loss, don't feel bad. Time heals all wounds. 6 myths of grief. And all of that we believe because that's what we're taught. And those are the behaviors that are going to follow because of those beliefs. Our children, when you ask them what's wrong, nothing. When our children act up or throw tantrums, go to your room. I don't want to hear that, or I don't want to see you crying. Come out when you're ready to act right. What does acting right even really mean, right? And I'm telling you guys this from what I used to tell my kids. When I first came back from grief recovery, the first thing that I needed to do was cry. I needed to cry in front of my kids and show them my vulnerability, because during the time of their dad's death, I tried my hardest not to cry in front of anybody. I was told that I needed to be strong and to move forward with grace. But guess what? When I cried, who were the first humans that came to me to hug me? It was my grandkids, because they were so young that they knew what authentic human emotions were. They weren't afraid to show it, and they held space for me because they didn't know any better yet, right? They were 6, 2, and 1. But they felt it. Like Lupe says, your kids feel your emotions. And so they felt me, they felt my pain, and they came and they hugged me because it was the right thing to do in their little minds. So I want to say, learn from your kids. Learn from those little 2, 3, 4-year-olds that are very, very honest about how they feel. Something stinks, something scares them, someone doesn't look right, you know, that they're going to be very honest with you, right? And a lot of times we're going to shut that down. Hey, don't say that. That's rude, right? Don't say that in front of other people. We teach them that, right? So be the leader. Be first. Teach your kids that it's okay to have those human emotions. And when you're helping them through those losses, don't judge them. Don't judge them. Just hold space for them, just like you would an adult.
Thank you, Dar. I switched my grid view and I can see, hi, Dr. Christiana Sanchez Whitman. I can see you now. I miss you guys. The next question is, in a place where culture is so strong, we look to our sainas or elderly for those traditional healing practices. How do you handle it as specialists when your sainas encourage others to deal with grief in the traditional way, like be strong, don't show your emotions to the kids, stay busy, etc.?
Yeah. You know, like I said, my mom is 80 years old and she is in that mindset. That for real, it's really difficult to try to, I feel like it's an imposition almost on her belief system. If I were to basically tell her that everything she taught me growing up was incorrect, you know, with all the myths that we talked about. But I think through it all is really the transitioning. And I think like right now with our signings, with utmost respect, you know, they are definitely our roots and our foundation of everything. And I always truly believe that they should always be part of the table. They should always be part of it. But having someone set that the tone or the mode, like Lupi mentioned when she came back from her training, do you really want to hear about this? I'm about to tell you some things that is going to make you cringe. It's going to make you think like I'm being disrespectful. It's going to maybe even question the things that you taught me as a parent, right? Because a lot of it is contradicting to the norm that we were growing up with. But I think part of it too is really bringing it to the level again of the grievers. And it's back to, I always have to ask myself when I'm doing my work is whose needs am I serving? And if I am talking to the direct griever, I want to make sure that I'm focusing on that need. So if it's going to be some situations or issues that's dealing with maybe an elderly loved one in the family that, you know, maybe will be unreceptive to these different thought processes or beliefs again, or just with the method, then we would go ahead and discuss that, because that also is work that the griever has to do, has to basically recognize that that's maybe challenging for them because of some of the how would you say it, some of the ways, the upbringing. And again, what we want to correct, we always talk about using the correct tools to paint, right? Growing up, it's like Lupi said, it's none of our ancestors or signers' faults of the things that they have taught us. They are basically just passing down traditions, practices, things that they've known for years. And I saw in the comments, it talked something about generation. And that just gets passed down. But like my daughter, I always tell her, she has an opportunity to break that generational pattern. She has an opportunity now with knowing what I know as a mom, not to say that my mom was wrong in any way or my dad, but being able to pass some of these tools now down to her. I know that there's going to be some changes if she were to have children, and also with, you know, my relatives that are kind of like in my generation as well. So start with the griever, figure out if that's what's really happening, and then work through that. And there's ways that we could bring this message out to people of all levels, because every single person, like Darlene said, is a griever, and they are probably dealing with some unresolved grief.
Great. Our last question for the evening to the panel. How does a victim of narcissistic mental and emotional abuse use the suggestions you offered to leave the relationship and start anew?
Can I take that one? I'll take that one really quick. So, you know, I'm going to answer this not from my own experience, but through watching two amazing grief recovery specialists transform their lives and having that happen to them. So it isn't about leaving the relationship. It's about being comfortable with who you are and dealing with your own healing journey as you go through this. because again, we have two specialists. One of them was already out of the relationship and still realized that she needed healing. The other one is still in the relationship and has an amazing marriage because of what work that she did with grief recovery. And so again, everybody's different. We're not going to teach you how to leave your loved one. We're going to teach you the tools that you need to go and embark on your own healing journey. And again, when your heart is broken, your head doesn't work right. And so once you go through this method, then you make your own decision. You can make your choice and be brave and bold. If you're going to walk out of that relationship or if you're going to stay in and fight for your marriage. Whatever it is, we're not going to tell you how to do it, but we can definitely teach you the tools to deal with being in an environment that is unhealthy for you and that constantly brings grief and loss into your life. So Kate, did you say that was the last question?
Last question.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I know that we went over time. I should have warned you guys that we never stay within our time because there's always so much that we can talk about. And when it comes to grief, it's always, hold on a second. Let me see here. There we go. So when it comes to grief, we can talk about it all day, every day, right? So we do have 3 more sessions of grief talk for the month of September. It's going to be every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We'll stream it live on Facebook as well. The topics on the last 3, however, are going to be more specific to the type of grief that that people are dealing with. And so we will put those flyers out there. We'll share it with the communities and with all of the different organizations. We'll put it on our Facebook page so that you guys all know what those subjects are, because some of them may interest you or may relate to you and some may not. And so we want you to jump on when you feel that it's something that you want to be a part of, but we welcome you to come to all of them anyway. So I wanted to turn this one over to Michelle, and then she can talk a bit about some of the resources that are out there.
Okay, so on the screen again, you know, we have the hotlines, and we put the hotlines out there because a lot of times when we are feeling at our lowest, it's never convenient, right? It's not like at 10 o'clock a.m. It's usually at 2 o'clock a.m. when everybody is sleeping and not accessible. So these hotline numbers that we have up there, they're 24 hours, 7 days a week. Again, these individuals that pick up these lines have been trained basically to handle, you know, any situation, whether it's just to talk you through a really, really hard time that you're facing, whether it's something that's a little bit more serious, whatnot. They are trained to respond to you. So please use these numbers that's on the screen. And I did want to acknowledge again, Dr. Whitman, who is here because this month, September, is Suicide Prevention Month. And I know that our island has been talking a lot about that. We're seeing, you know, the numbers are becoming very, how would you say, underscored in this time. So Christiana, are you still on? Would you kind of just give us a run through of what we have to look forward to?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Kate Baltazar Dodge. But Christiana's totally fine. Everyone on this call, I just want to say thank you for sharing your stories. You are all the expert of your stories, and even the questions really just showed a vulnerability and a strength that you all kind of exhibit, which is just empowering sitting here listening to it. So thank you all for sharing your time in a time when we're probably all very media overloaded on these calls and stuff. So I think it's been a great use of my evening, certainly. So thank you for, so I'm the project director for the Focus on Life grant. It's a youth suicide prevention grant, but we did, I do want to share a couple of highlights of activities for Suicide Prevention Month. Unfortunately, like Michelle said, we have the headlines have shown or have displayed increases in suicide on our island, and that lends itself to people being more, even more concerned and trying to figure out how to get help. I loved Darlene, I think she started it, was saying there's, you know, grief recovery is not, there's no one size fits all way to grieve, right? And there's no one size fits all way to grow either, you know, and so grief recovery method is one way, and there's a lot of other ways. And I think there were so many questions, and I was thinking about all these different things, and I I think we all kind of grieve and we all kind of grow in different ways. And some of us might respond really well to grief recovery. Some of us might respond really well to formal counseling services. Some of us might just respond by starting a blog or using a creative outlet to express ourselves. So I think the different activities over the month and the work that our community is doing really lends itself to the various strengths in our community. So starting off, I guess tomorrow is World Suicide Prevention Day, and in this virtual world, we've had to kind of switch things up a little bit. So we invite you. There's going to be on social media tomorrow. If you follow, I'll put GBWIC's or Guam Behavioral Health's handle for Instagram and Peace's handle for Instagram in the chat. But we're going to be inviting everyone to light a candle at 8 p.m. by your window to kind of stand in solidarity with those who have been lost to suicide and the survivors of those who've been left behind due to someone dying by suicide, and then also to support suicide prevention. And then if you take a photo of it, share it, we'll kind of try to feature them all together on our page. And then if you're not comfortable taking a photo or lighting a candle, we just ask you to repost and kind of spread that message so that we kind of have this virtual candlelight ceremony. The other thing that we're hosting is something similar to this forum, but a little bit more casual maybe. We're doing next week, Friday. It's the More Than Ever Before live talks about mental health. We're kind of playing off this hashtag that's the president's suicide prevention campaign, more than ever before. So knowing that right now, more than ever before, it's important to talk about mental health, as it's important to talk about mental health in the context in the context that it's just as important as our physical health, right? So we're kind of playing off of that. It'll be via Zoom, and there's a registration form that will probably go out by Friday. And so kind of similar to this, we're hoping to have an open forum. We're really trying to target kind of the youth and young adults. So like the 18 to 39, 40 year olds is kind of who we're really targeting, just because we're seeing that they're the ones who are really at the greatest risk right now, but also we're trying to figure out, like what are their needs in the community? How comfortable, what space are they in to even start talking about mental health and start talking about suicide or grieving, and so all these different issues. The last thing I just want to highlight, and as far as Focus on Life and GBWIC's outreach, is we do have people are asking about training and getting trained in different things. And unfortunately, Assist, which Michelle, I was like, I'm so happy I was able to get Assist trained right before when we had that 1 month of freedom, or lighter restrictions. And so we're not able to do the Assist or Safe Talk trainings that a lot of people are used to, and we get a lot of praise in our division about. But there is a virtual training. It's called Living Works Start. It's about a 60 to 90-minute training that can be done virtually. So I will put the contact to in the chat also. If you are interested in receiving that training, we're happy to get you registered for that, and that can be done at your own time. Just other things you might see are Ipanengan, Michelle mentioned, Ipanengan Suicide Forum is going to be virtual later on this month, September 30th. I'm sure Michelle will share it on her platforms also. Ipanengan out of the UOG is a very big partner with Peace, and so we're happy to support them. And then Breaking Wave Theater Company, they are also a host of creatives who are really doing good work in, again, using the creative arts to talk about mental health. And so they're actually hosting different seminars via Zoom to use dance or use theater to talk about mental health. And then they're putting together a whole show that they're going to air on Zoom. I think it's on the 27th. Again, Michelle I'm sure she'll share it on all her platforms with the flyers and everything else. But a lot of good things, like you ladies said earlier, there are a lot of resources. It's just that a lot of times we don't know where to go for those resources, or we're scared of what those resources might lead us to, even logging on. So for some of you might not have wanted to log on to this talk today, and you did. And so that's that's a big step in your own path toward recovery also. So thank you, ladies, again for hosting this and for all the work that you do in the community. But I'll include those that information in the chats also.
Thank you for the partnership, Christiana. And we will definitely be sharing that on all of the different platforms so everyone can be a part of it.
Lupe, do you want to talk a little bit about this number, what this number is and what it means for the people of Saipan?
Sure. So the Community Guidance Center is the state mental and behavioral health division under the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation. And so by contacting that number, you will be able to reach a variety of different clinics so they can connect you to the appropriate clinic depending on your need. Again, from youth to adult, we serve all ages. So yeah, it does fall under the umbrella of the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation. Our services are not necessarily located physically at the hospital. So by contacting the number, you can find out how to get in touch with the right people to meet the right need. And not each clinic, but some of the clinics have grief recovery specialists, so you can reach out and find us by contacting that number as well to see how we can provide support through this time.
This is perfect. Let me go ahead and share. Michelle, anything else on this page before I move on to the next contact information?
Nope, I would love for everybody to screenshot this or take a picture of this, put it on your phones before you get off the Zoom and have it readily accessible.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we are streaming this live on Facebook, so you can also pick it up there if you want to watch the replay on this. And so the next one that I want to share with you guys is this. So this is our information. So we are the Grief Recovery Guam and CNMI team. There's 3 of us that you have heard today, actually 4, because Kate helped us facilitate some of those questions. Thank you so much, Kate. There's many of us, both on Guam and Saipan. You'll see some of our other grief recovery specialists that will be hosting some of the talks that we're going to be having on the Wednesdays here in September. You can also find us on Facebook, Giving Grief a Voice. And then if you want to check out our credibility, you can also go to griefrecoverymethod.com. This is where we all got certified. This institute has been around for over 40 years. Our program, our group program, is now evidence-based. For those of you with a mental health hat on, we are evidence-based, and so that is an amazing step forward with grief recovery. Remember, we're all about the heart. We're all about helping people with dealing with their human emotions, and so we love that we can collaborate with our mental health professionals in both Guam and Saipan, because we know that both mental and emotional health is so important to our overall physical well-being, right? And so again, we are just another option on the island for those of you that are looking to find some sort of hope and light amidst all of this darkness that you're going through right now. I know that someone had asked about how do I become a grief recovery specialist? If you go on the griefrecoverymethod.com, it's probably one of the first things that you'll see on their page is how to become a specialist. And the great thing about being in this era of COVID-19 is that they now do it virtual. We never were able to do that before. It always had to be in the physical environment. And so we've been able to pivot and take many of our programs onto the online platform. And so we do have that. So we are now, not everyone is able to do the programs online. There are a few of us that can do it, but please book an appointment with us on our grief recovery or Giving Grief a Voice page on Facebook, and one of us will contact you, and we'll talk to you. We'd love to hear your story and see if our program is something that will work for you. Because again, it isn't one size fits all. Some people may need something outside of grief recovery, may need more therapy or counseling, or even a psychologist or psychiatrist. And we want to be able to help you either figure that out when you come and talk to us, or you can figure it out yourself when you talk to us and realize that either program is for you or not for you. So we do have programs online, both for individuals wanting to take our program one-on-one. We are going to be offering the group programs in a few months. And then I also want to announce that we also have what we call helping children with loss. And so it's not about us teaching the kids, but it's about us helping the adults how to navigate and support losses that children are going through. So whether you are a teacher, a counselor, a parent, a grandparent, a godparent, an aunt, and uncle, this program is for you. If you've got little humans, I like to call them, that are in your care, or that you just want to help through some of the things that they're going through in their life, especially right now in this era of COVID-19. That is an amazing program, and it's a way for you to learn grief recovery and be able to teach your kids how to be comfortable with their emotional truth, and then to be that part with ears for them as they navigate through that. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I know we went over our time, and I appreciate all of you that stuck around to the very end. We appreciate you. We want to be able to give you content that is going to help you through these trying times, and then be available for you for some of the other resources that you may need over the next several weeks or months as we navigate through this pandemic. And so any final words or thoughts from my co-host here tonight?
I just want to say it was a pleasure to be on this talk with you all. And, don't look at this as just a one and done. As Dar said, we're gonna continue to offer what we can from where we're at. And everything may be closed down, but, we still have virtual platforms. And I love that we can still connect in this way. But please, again, it's never too soon to start your healing. Get a hold of one of us. You have our name, so you can look us up through Instagram or through Facebook. We are present. And then also our grief recovery page on Facebook. And let's, get you we'll have a conversation to see if we are a right fit, or if we could refer you to other types of helps and supports. And thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe.
Yeah, and to echo all that, yes, I'm so grateful to be a part of this team, and thank you for everybody who signed up, who joined in on the Facebook Live. It means so much, and thank you for all that you're doing for yourself. By joining us tonight, whether it be for you, your family, your neighbor, your cousin, your auntie, your student, thank you. I think talking about it more is something we're all slowly getting used to, myself included. And so thank you for joining us tonight, and allowing this space and bringing us into this safe space with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we appreciate all of you so much. And we again are so honored to have you on here. Christiana said it best when she said, just you being on here showed a lot of courage for you to come on and just to listen, to see what else can be out there for you. So we're going to go ahead and end tonight's Grief Talk. We are going to be available again to do this next week, Wednesday, and the other 2 Wednesdays after that. We will get those flyers out there. We'll get those disseminated to all the different organizations. However you got this, the information on this one, you're more than likely going to get it that same way, because we're going to share it with those same organizations and people and resources out there. So we'd love to have you guys again next week, Wednesday. So until then, everybody take care, and we shall talk to you soon. I'm going to end the Facebook Live as well. Okay, bye everybody.
Mwah.